All right, two stories today. We're in Tribeca, Manhattan, which is now the wealthiest zip code in the city, which is pretty crazy. I moved here in 1982 and it wasn't anything like that. Now it is. Fancy schmancy. A great, great bakery that's in the middle of the lobby of an office building called Arcade Bakery. One of the best bakers in the city. Everything he does, his baguettes, his croissants, you name it, this guy's on fire. We're gonna spend the morning with him doing what he does, baking and tasting the baked goods. Then we're gonna head over here, Racine, a restaurant that I love. We were here once before years back. We have a brand new chef. We have Pascaline Lepeltier, Master Sommelier, Milieu Ouvrier de France, Best Sommelier of France 2018, first woman for those last two ever. She's in charge of the wine program, Arnaud Trans, which is like Racine 2.0. I love what they're doing here, so stay tuned. It's a good one. I'm Mike Colameco, industry insider. Been in the business my whole life, and I know what it takes to succeed. Each week we'll take you into real kitchens, filmed in real time. Backstage passes to a day in the life of chefs, restaurateurs, and their teams. The competition's fierce. Careers, life savings, and reputations hang in the balance. These are my people, and this is their passion. And that's what's next on Mike Colameco's Real Food. Mike Colameco's Real Food is brought to you by the continuous, generous support of the following underwriters.
Extra virgin olive oil from Colavita, an Italian family brand.
Rachel Ray's signature specialty food line, designed for preparing meals at home.
This baking thing, when did it get in your head? When did you decide to wake up at 3:30 in the morning, come through 20-degree weather, and mix flour and some kind of Levant and a pinch of salt and turn it into things?
When I was younger, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life, but I realized that I wanted a job where I didn't have an alarm clock. Somehow I managed to find the exact opposite,
I was about to say,
worst case scenario job for that
lifestyle. Yes.
So, but I love baking, so that's a small price to pay. About maybe 22 years ago, I was baking pizza at home, and I used to buy the dough at a store. Went to the store, they had no dough, so I opened up a cookbook. I made dough to make my pizza that night. That's how I got into making dough. I started making pizza at home with my own dough, then I started making bread. Little by little, I was making sourdough bread at home for a couple of years, just a hobby, passionate home baker, and then I took a class at the French Culinary Institute.
Right, they had a great program.
So I went right from there into working in a professional bakery.
In the city?
In the city. I started at Boulay Bakery in Tribeca, and that was about 18, 19 years ago.
When did you open up?
We're about 5 years, going to be 5 years old in May.
And the backstory is, you wanted to do a shop, but rather than you saying, hey, I want a storefront with, Thomas Street, or I want to be on Church Street, you're like, you see this more in Asia, I think, in Japan, where you'll have stores in these funny locations, like in hallways, but this works financially because this space is underutilized. So it's a beautiful space, but people, I guess, didn't see the potential of it, so it was hard for them to rent. They marketed the space, they couldn't rent the space. So for me, I wanted to focus on a retail bakery that focused on fresh-made baked products like you would get in France. Right.
And it's really hard to do that financially if you have street frontage in Manhattan because the rents are just prohibitive. So this was a way to do what I wanted to do as a baker and hopefully make it work financially.
I remember all the years when I was in the kitchens in New York in the 80s, bakers would come over from Europe, from Switzerland, from France, and they'd want to open a bake shop in the city, and we'd all be like, don't. The money's not there. It doesn't work because Americans don't shop for baked goods the way Europeans do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing I think is that you need to be in an area where people cook and they eat at home, and dinner is an important meal, and then bread is an accompaniment to that meal. So in New York City, people have so many options for takeout, for this, for that, or they're eating on the go constantly. So if you're doing takeout, you don't need bread to go with your takeout, generally speaking. So, you know, we just don't have that culture. People don't have the time to have those kind of meals. So, you know, it's hard to just sell bread and be financially viable.
The full line, I'm looking behind you. So you've got your straight up baguettes. What's on that top shelf?
The top shelf is babka.
You do babka here as well.
Uh-huh.
And is that a Danish dough?
It's a laminated brioche dough.
Laminated brioche. Do you have a couple of doughs that you play around with that you do a lot with? Like that laminated brioche becomes the babka. What else does that become?
Also becomes sugar brioche, lemon sugar brioche. We do various Danish, so seasonal Danish with that dough. So we try not to do too many doughs. I mean, again, you have to be efficient because you know it's
business.
It's a business and it's a hard business. So,
Yeah.
so we try to think of ways that we can do as much variety without mixing 75 different little tiny mixes.
Right.
Because you can't make any money that way.
So for those that don't know, laminate doughs, part of what makes them rise is that rolling, folding, where you're using a sheeter at some point. So we'll end up with nearly 1,000 layers of...
For yeasted laminated doughs, you're not going to have nearly that many layers. For puff pastry, because the dough is a lot stiffer, you can support a lot more layers, and that's how you get your rise out of a puff pastry. But for a yeasted dough, typically the most you're going to get is about 55 layers.
Okay.
So this is our onion caraway rye. This is a sourdough bread with sauteed onions and caraway. It's still soft, a little sweet, and then you have the flavor of the caraway. This is the kind of bread that I grew up with, so it's one of my favorites, yeah. We also have the quinoa bread, flaxseed, quinoa seeds, sesame seeds, toasted oat bran, a little bit of ground hazelnut, has a nutty flavor. It's a nice...
Sounds great, actually.
Yeah. I'm not a big ingredient bread person, so I'm more baguette is my favorite bread. That's really what I like. After the baguettes, then I like a sourdough bread. So this is just our basic sourdough. We try to make the sourdough very mild, so it's going to complement the food. It's not meant to be really assertively sour. I mean, again, I'm like very sort of conservative.
I think you summed it up. You're like a baguette guy.
Yes.
And there's not a lot of people that say that, so we'll just leave it at that. I think anyone that gets baking will take away what they want.
Well, I'm very influenced by the French mindset, and so the bread is meant to accompany food. So they don't like the flavors of the bread to be too assertive. So that's one of the great
Especially
things about
with a baguette. Right.
So if you use commercial yeast, you're not going to get such an assertive flavor. You're going to get more of the flavor of the fermentation and the grain, and that's going to complement the food. It's going to leave a lot of room for the flavor of the food. If you make a baguette with natural yeast, that's the challenge of making a baguette with natural yeast, is so that it's not so acidic, so that it's still going to complement food. So you certainly can do it with a natural yeast, but it's a little bit like you have to go against the strengths of the natural yeast to make a proper baguette. So we don't do that.
You have Ippies down there. You have another baguette that I don't see, that I'd never seen anywhere else before. You gave me one the last time I was here.
So the laminated baguette is one of our specialties, and again, it's a laminated product. So we take baguette dough, which is not exactly traditional, and we layer the baguette dough with butter. So that's challenging because the baguette dough is so soft compared to the doughs that you would typically laminate. And then we take that laminated baguette dough and we just make it into a thin strip that we wrap around the outside of a baguette, so that just the outside crust is the layered dough. The inside is just regular baguette dough.
It's so buttery, it's so rich, it's so deceptive. Years back, we filmed at Racine, but really today it's a totally different restaurant. Arnaud Tranche is still there, but Diego Moya is now the new chef doing a very different menu. And Master Sommelier Pascaline Lepeltier, formerly of Rouge Tomate, is also a managing partner expanding this amazing wine program.
Ordering cabbage?
So those are bobo?
Bobos. They kind of grow them as like a full-size chicken, but still small. Those are great.
I love them. Head on, feet on, make great stock.
We serve it with a little bit of grilled spigarella, which is kind of like a bitter green, the family of kale, a little bit leafier. And these are the two condiments. We make a salsa verde with spigarella stems, a little bit of shallot, and like a really bright green spigarella oil. So this is very kale-like and green and bitter. And then for the second condiment, we make a kosho, which is a traditional Japanese paste of fermented chilies and citrus. So this is Meyer lemon kosho and a little bit of olive oil. Rocky, can you take me to 34? Chicken, solo. Always interested in cooking. Had a really good upbringing because my parents had a pizzeria and a restaurant. You know, there was something really tactile about it, and
Yep.
you know, the ability to be able to do things that made people happy was so poignant. So I started watching all these like old school TV shows, you know, like Great Chefs and things like that.
Good show.
You know, and then you see these guys that are dressed in these beautiful suits, long aprons, and they're just making gorgeous food. Nothing at all like what I was making at the restaurant. Really fell deeply in love with it and started reading and experimenting on my own, and eventually just landed in kitchens. So these are the sunchokes. I have a real affinity to sunchokes, especially when they're kind of like very roasted and very almost eviscerated, so that they're creamy on the outside and the outside is almost like chicken skin. So we take them and we basically do a play on red-eye gravy. So we reduce coffee with some sherry vinegar and some black cardamom. We glaze them as they come out of the fryer, and then on top there's a little bit of jamon serrano fat and fresh jamon serrano.
It's a great dish, man. I had this when I was here with my son. That was killer. They all were. Skip the $75,000 cooking school route.
I really wanted to go.
Good. You know, I'm
honestly.
glad you didn't. You saved the money. Trust me.
I definitely have seen, you know, the way it's gone with some kids, and they're stuck with all this debt and not making a lot of money.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have gone, but you know, in a way, I got really lucky in the kitchens that I landed in. And these are the leeks. They've been pre-roasted, portioned, and seasoned. And it's kind of a take on almondine, where we serve them with like a very clean almond puree, and then a very roasted almond puree made with olive oil and toasted leek tops. Help me out. So it's 2 lentils, leeks, steak tartare, and heirloom beans, all going to 22. So this is a salt cod croquette. We take lots of cod heads and fish bones, reduce them down, and then emulsify them like an aioli. And then it's just like very shallowly fried with sauce gribiche, which is pretty traditional,
Yeah, classic.
and salt fermented radishes.
Chef, first demo is going to be, it looks to me like,
Lentils.
Yeah.
When we were coming up with this dish, we really wanted to have something that was very kind of grounded, and I think nothing's more of the earth than lentils.
yeah. So Diego found his way to you.
Yeah, like a serendipity in a way, because Diego unfortunately couldn't make it with Hemlock, not because of his talents, but just, as you know, this is such a tough business that when you don't have the right investor, it's very brutal environment. It kind of was very clear that it would be really a magic fit.
Depending on the lentils, sometimes they'll cook faster, sometimes slower, so we just try to be really mindful on, you know, how much time they actually take. So it's a very simple dish, just some lentils. So this is our creme fraiche.
In-house made.
In-house,
Yep.
we use really good dairy, and it takes about a week. And we add just like a hint of Dijon mustard, just because I think lentils and Dijon are so classic. Right? So we basically take this with a bit of salt, just some lemon juice for brightness. Make a nice little mound. Trying to leave like a small divot in the middle. Where we take some of this steelhead trout roe. I like to use steelhead a lot in the menu because it has like a really nice fattiness. This steelhead is from upstate New York and the fat on it is ridiculous. And then this oil, what we do is we take lots and lots of bay leaves and we put it on the grill. It's a really nice citrus
Really
quality.
funny, right?
Yeah. So we add a little bit of this oil to the top and a bit of sea salt.
Bingo.
And that's it.
Pure and simple. All right. This is what a walk-in's supposed to look like. Everything's bloody labeled. See, labeled, dated. That's what we like to see. And then here, this is where it gets fun. Slightly colder back here. Aging the duck breasts, as you can see. These ones are already scored for service. You see the knife marks on the top. Those are ready to go for tonight, should they need them. These guys are a little less old. Drying out here, they're dated. Meat's being aged. Filet mignon, obviously completely cleaned. That's gonna go in the steak tartare. This is crazy. This is pork loin. Pork loin. He's aging it 2 weeks. And I think I might have a piece of this tonight. I might ask him to cut one of those off. I've never had aged pork before. That's crazy. I don't smell anything. It smells totally clean. Various fermentations that are kind of done, so now they're stable at this temperature. Pickles and ferments. And again, everything labeled, everything soigné, everything clean. I love a clean walk-in.
So for the next dish, this is the steak tartare. You know, everyone does the caper thing, and you know, there's other restaurants that do riffs on it, but I really wanted to push it in a different direction. And what I really love about beef and steak tartare in general is brininess. Like capers are very briny, but I went in a different direction. We decided to make a connection between the tartare and black olives. We took those olives and we pureed them with a bit of squid ink for a little bit more salinity, and lots of burnt fennel seed, which have this very interesting fennel characteristic.
So what were you before Casamono?
Before Casamono, I kind of peppered around New York for a while, and before that I was in France for a little bit.
Stagiaire kind of stuff?
Stagiaire. I ended up working for a year at Arpège.
Arpège, you said?
Arpège.
Whoa!
Yeah.
So that's across from the Rodin Museum.
Yeah.
The old Alan Sonderon's orchestra, where I worked.
That's awesome.
So the kitchen, you worked on those staircases doing orangettes and peeling leaves of thyme.
Exactly.
Literally.
I didn't know you worked there.
We did press on the stairwell.
Wow. I wanted to add a little bit of crunch, so we had these beautiful squares of fennel that have been perfectly blanched, nice and crispy. Just a little bit of black Niçoise olives. This dish takes a lot of acid. If you don't use
It's super rich.
the right amount of acid, it can be very, very bitter and kind of austere, but the acid really brings up all those flavors of olive that I really love. And the real secret to this dish
It's coming off the hot side.
is a little bit of roasted beef fat.
No way. So you're adding fat. Wow, look at the color that became.
It can be very deceptive because it looks very, very dark and murky, but when you taste it, it's very Provençal and very acidic. We make an aioli, basically like a mayonnaise, with a little bit of star anise.
Bingo.
That's it.
It's crazy. It doesn't look anything like tartare. It's so funny how we eat with our eyes, right? I'm looking at this and it's kind of dark and gnarly. Fennel and olives and beef. Stop eating the whole thing. That's really good.
So I really like the texture of fluke, but sometimes it needs a little bit of oomph and more tackiness, so we cure it in salt, sugar, and a little bit of yuzu for about 2 hours so that it really becomes a little bit more dense. We dress it with a little bit of dashi, a very simple dashi, and then we make a relish out of pine nuts, a little bit of shio kombu, and yuzu zest, just to amplify the flavors of the fish. So I had this dish at Detroit Brothers Restaurant.
They invented it.
When I
Salmon
was
with
younger.
sorrel.
And I read about it. I saw it when I was watching Great Chefs when I was a kid. So I really wanted to do something as an homage, but not the same way. So we cooked the salmon only on one side very delicately, and then just glaze it in drawn butter, sorrel juice, and big pieces of sorrel.
It's an unusual.
Kind of bitter, very, very sour,
Yeah.
which is a great foil for like a fatty fish.
That was a brilliant dish. That's the 1960s.
1964. This is a mallard duck. To reinforce that orange flavor, we take some dried mandarin peel with salt, and we kind of cure them and dry them off. So we take it when we're ready to go, and we just give it a little bit of a grill. In the meanwhile, I'm searing just one piece of endive. With a lot of these vegetables, a little bit of sear or char kind of really brings out the meatiness. All right, and it's a plate. I like to take the tenderloin and serve it as well because it's really meaty and juicy.
Why wouldn't you?
I like to hide the tenderloins as like a little surprise. This is almost like a juice caramel. So we take navel oranges, juice them down, steep them with a little bit of bergamot peel and Earl Grey, so you get a little bit of more of that bright bergamot. And then we cook it down with a blonde caramel and a little bit of foie gras, a little bit of celery, and that's it.
How did you first hear of Diego?
Well, I mean, I knew his name. I'd never been to Hemlock. I just never had much time anyway
Right.
to go.
You work in the restaurant
Yeah,
business.
but I mean, one of my best friends used to be there like every week. So I heard, from friends, but only very good feedbacks. I read a few things online as well. Let's talk to him. Let's meet together. We started talking last summer, and maybe like a month and a half later, it was a done deal.
I had no idea what I wanted to do. Honestly, I was kind of like in transition. The restaurant closed. What do I do now? And I really just wanted to get cooking again. And I have a deep appreciation for wine. And I really, when I speak to people that are very educated in wine, I get inspired. I think that they really, they work very hard and they study very hard.
Yeah. Taste.
And their palates are so particular and so dialed in, and Pascaline is probably one of the best in the world when it comes to that.
Period. Pascaline Lepeltier was always a rising star in the wine world. First of all, she's a master sommelier, one of only a few hundred people to ever pass that grueling exam here in the USA since it started over 30 years ago. Then, in 2018, she was awarded the Milieu Ouvrier de France, a huge honor and the first female ever to do that in the beverage category. A month later, she won Best Sommelier in France competition. Again, the first female ever to do so. What a talent, what a year. She's one of my heroes.
Milieu Ouvrier de France is something that you find only in France. It's something created in the 1920s by a journalist that realized that we didn't pay enough recognition nationally to crafts. So certain areas were totally neglected in terms of national recognition. That is a term, and the idea is like you are really representing the best of the best, but not only you have individual competency, but you are also able to understand the tradition where you come from and see the future and participate to that evolution, and you're able to mentor.
And you got it. First try, out of the box. First woman. It's fantastic.
First woman in sommelier, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Big firsts. And then, continuing, there's also another award that's given out. You explain that to me because it's 2018 Best Sommelier of France.
That's organized by the Sommelier Association. So
Okay.
it's by your peers, the winner of the precedent competition, by other MOF. So you go through rounds of different qualification, and at the end is a final with a bunch of different exercises on stage that you are scored. Yeah.
And then something else recently. You got, and this, by the way, this is Best Sommelier in France ever. First time a woman's won Best Sommelier.
Yeah, in the new way of the organizing the competition, yes.
So two ceilings broken, back to back, a month apart. Yeah. That's crazy. And then there was one other thing recently, wasn't there? Something else that you got picked for.
Yeah, no, it was as a very big surprise. There is this French magazine called La Revue du Vin de France, which kind of the French equivalent of Decanter or Wine Spectator, and they named me the personality of the year, so first woman. So that was January.
So you poured two wines here. One I know, one I don't. This is so Clisson. So we're in the Loire. We're drinking Bellon Bourgogne.
Yeah.
This is all I drink now.
Yeah, so Muscadet still have a bad reputation. I think it's changing, fortunately, little by little through major advocates. You are one of them, David Lee is one of them, Eric Asimov has been one of them for a long time and all that.
Try and find better value. This wine retails for $25, $24, and it's at the high end.
So you don't even see Muscadet on the label anymore. Because what's happening today, so Muscadet is a small region in the Loire Valley on the west coast by the ocean. So what you see here is a cru. It means that there is a lot of different soil types in this area. All of them are mostly a volcanic base, to make it very simple, igneous based, with a bit of metamorphism. And they realized that depending where the grapes was growing, the taste was different. And so they started to put the name of the commune or the village where it was coming from. And Clisson is very famous for its granite. So let's say it's from that soil type, let's decrease the yield, let's make a longer aging, and suddenly what you have is one of the greatest wine in France.
So turn this cabbage so we can see what the camera gets. It's interesting to me. It just has this openness to it.
Yeah,
It's
so-
not like this tightly, gnarly bowling ball thing.
It's more like a flower. It kind of
Thank you.
blossoms.
Yeah.
The really beautiful thing about this cabbage is that the inside core is very dense, but the outside is very leafy. Probably the most simple dish on the menu, but also I think the most punchy. So we started on the flat top so we get a little bit more even char, but then I really wanted to have that grill flavor that you really get from fire.
What is that?
Bagnol's vinegar, and reduced it, added a little bit of sugar, almost created like a thin gas streak. And then every once in a while you just give it a brush and all that starts to caramelize. You know, in a way, cooking meat and fish, there's a technique that you follow, and then eventually you get really good at it. I think with veg, it's a universe. And I think that, you know, as technique progresses, we find new ways to use vegetables, whether it be fermenting or juicing or roasting. And for me, it's like the most exciting part of cooking, because you take really nice veg and then you make a dish out of just them. I think you can really surprise palates and like create new flavors, techniques, and really do something special. Towards the end, we glaze it with a little bit of duck fat, which we actually save from when we render our ducks.
When you saute in the pan.
Yeah. You can see some of the lower leaves are still green, as if they were just barely steamed, but the top is a little bit more gnarled and bitter. It's basically the whole dish. We just plate this on top, just a little bit of duck fat, and just some sea salt.
That's it.
That's it.
Wow. My Colameco's Real Food is brought to you by the continuous, generous support of the following underwriters.
Extra virgin olive oil from Colavita, an Italian family brand.
Rachel Ray's signature specialty food line, designed for preparing meals at home.